Cocaine is flooding into Europe. Europol-supported operations seized nearly 30 tons of the drug in the past year alone. Some of the continent's biggest ports have become a battleground for global cartels. And these criminal empires, based in Central and South America, are now embedded across Europe. They're exploiting traditional trade routes and rewriting the rules of the global drug trade. Europe's police forces are fighting back. But are they really ready for what might be coming next? South American cartels began moving cocaine into Europe during the 1980s through the rugged Spanish coastline of Galicia.
Why Spain? Well, there are cultural links, there's a language link, there are trade links, familiar links. So it was quite easy for them to begin to set up there.
In Galicia, you essentially have 3 generations of smugglers. The first bringing in tobacco, the second drugs like hashish, and the third cocaine, which is where they can make the big money these days.
Early shipments were modest, but by the early 1990s, Spain had become Europe's primary cocaine getaway.
Dockers are being either bribed or intimidated. It's a sort of carrot and stick type system. In Colombia, they used to call it plato or plombo, money or bullets.
Portugal also emerged as another key waypoint.
The principal trade route is just sort of piggybacking the already established trade routes, taking things like fruits and flowers to the European continent.
Galicia, Lisbon, Algeciras. These were the original corridors of Europe's cocaine economy. Then, the network expanded.
As the market in Europe got bigger and the demand is huge in Europe, then, what do you need? You need bigger ports.
The routes moved north, toward the container ports of Antwerp and Rotterdam, where the volume of trade offered more cover, and east into France via Marseille.
The other reason for that is the market isn't just Europe, it's actually using Europe as a stepping stone to other markets, including Russia and the Middle East, particularly the Gulf states.
What began as backdoor smuggling soon evolved into a continent-spanning operation.
This is something that's very difficult to control because illegal drugs generate huge amounts of cash. The cartels are massively wealthy, and so they've got far more resources than the police.
Initially, Latin American cartels were content to partner with local gangs to move their product across Europe. They supplied the cocaine. Europeans handled the distribution. Business boomed until things began changing 5,000 miles from Europe in the US, the cartel's biggest market.
Just as the world economy is integrated, so unfortunately the drug trade is integrated. We can't look at the issue of supply in Latin America without also looking at the issue of demand in the United States.
In the mid-2010s, the US began squeezing the cartels harder than it had in years. After a long focus on opioids, American law enforcement turned its attention back to cocaine.
What we've seen really historically is that as drug use exploded in the United States, repeatedly the US has attempted to stop it at source. Now, there are very strong arguments that a much better way to stop it is stop the demand, but successive US administrations have decided to launch a war on drugs, as they say, and focus that on the suppliers.
Border controls were tightened. Joint operations with Mexican forces ramped up. High-level traffickers were extradited in growing numbers. Smuggling routes became riskier and more expensive. Moving tons of cocaine into the US was no longer just costly, it was dangerous.
If it gets more difficult to operate in America, a move scaling up your operations in Europe is a logical step.
Alongside that, inside the Sinaloa cartel, a violent power struggle broke out between El Chapo's sons and the old guard.
What we saw was the fracturing of the top of that cartel. And one consequence of that sort of internecine division is that both sides are looking for another market. Europe presents that attractive option.
Another factor is purely economic. Illegal drugs cost more in Europe than they do in North America.
Europe offered high profits, weaker enforcement, and fewer barriers. Before 2015, Latin American cartels mostly acted as wholesalers.
They would be the providers. They would package and deliver cocaine to Europe, to allies in that region who could then distribute it and traffic it elsewhere.
After 2015, things began to shift. Cartel chemists started traveling to Europe to oversee quality control.
Les cartels mexicains s'infiltrent en France. En fait, les policiers l'ont découvert lors du démantèlement d'un réseau de fabrication de drogue de synthèse dans le Var.
This was Sinaloa's first confirmed operation on French soil. The cartel operated by taking a cut of the profits, leaving a local mid-level French gang to run the lab.
Colombian and Mexican traffickers began forging direct partnerships with European gangs, bypassing intermediaries.
These cartels, they're like any conglomerate. You end up thinking, well, we could expand our profits if we didn't just deliver. We weren't just wholesalers, but we were distributors too.
The cartels had secured a foothold. Now, they were digging in.
The growing supply of drugs in Europe has definitely led to an increase in violence.
Drive-by shootings, car bombings, even assassination plots against public officials. The cartels are buying off dock workers, infiltrating ports and overwhelming law enforcement.
And we've seen rival gangs fighting turf wars with Kalashnikovs in cities like Marseille, Madrid or Rotterdam.
So how are European authorities fighting back? Operation Desert Light was a major part of that effort. Police launched a coordinated raid across 6 countries, taking down a so-called super cartel that controlled nearly a third of Europe's cocaine trade.
They do see that as a potential glimmer of hope that if you act together, then you can reduce the power of these cartels.
Ports are getting smarter. Container screening is ramping up. Anti-corruption units are targeting dock workers and customs agents on cartel payrolls.
You're fighting a multi-headed hydra that, you arrest one lot of drugs traffickers, you put a stop to their operations, then you see an upsurge of violence on the streets because rival gangs want to move in and grab their business.
Police and intelligence agencies across Europe are sharing information and coordinating their response. But the cartels are holding their ground. Now, the fear from European law enforcement is what might come next.
I think the European governments themselves would say that they have not been as prepared as they should be.
So far, the Latin American gangs have not been sending their enforcers, their gunmen, their sicarios to Europe, but the threat is always there. This is the worst nightmare for European police forces.
The evidence is the way to stop it is to stop the demand, not the supply. It's a business that the people running it will defend at absolutely any cost.